Hi, Joe. Did you have a question? Joe, did you have a question?
Not yet. I just turned in.
Okay, you got your hand raised. So I was,
How do I do that? I'm sorry.
that's all right. It's good that it works.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad it does too.
All right, I will lower your hand.
Oh, thank you.
But there should be a button right in the middle for everyone who's listening on Zoom. There should be a button right in the middle of your screen that says raise hand. So if you raise your hand, um, that lets the board know that you would
Got
like
it.
to either make a question or a comment.
Well, I just see two pictures, Jane Moran and Matthew Ronca.
Yep,
Okay.
so
Hi.
far. Yeah, although, so this is because we have to do a different format on Zoom to allow for more than 100 potential participants. We have to do a webinar format. I'll turn my video on too. We have to do a webinar format. And so what that means is that the public has to be in the attendees list, and then the board will be in the panelist. And so the board will be able to talk and converse, and we will allow the public to speak when they raise their hand, and then they'll be able to join the meeting. Otherwise, everyone will just be watching. All right. So, Joe, I am going to remove your permission to talk and
Okay.
put you back. So, if you're a board member on the call, can you just raise your hand so you jump to the top of my list? Thank you. I am inviting you all to be a panelist, so please accept. All right. Looks like we are just missing Elise, but everyone else is here.
All right, I'm going to start by reading the remote meeting script and we can jump into our agenda. All right. Hi, everybody. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body as well as members of the public may access this meeting via virtual means. Participants may access this meeting through the remote meeting link as posted on the meeting agenda and through the town's online calendar. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by raising their hand or otherwise signaling their intent to speak. This meeting will be recorded. Please take care to mute your microphone unless you have been recognized by the chair. We will now confirm attendance of members. Please respond with present if you're on the call. Elise Malowski. Still no. Just someone try to let me know if you see her join. Lucia Lopez.
Present.
Great. Matthew Ronca.
Present.
Michael King.
Present.
Parker Happ.
Present.
Jane Moran.
Present.
Karen Wills.
Present.
Vikasath Prati.
Present.
And Rob Benson. I'm obviously here. And staff, John Gelsich.
Present.
And Lori St. John.
Present.
All right, great. Everybody's here but Elise. So tonight's meeting agenda is to go over the MBTA community. So we have three kind of proposals that were forwarded to us by the Zoning Advisory Committee. So I think before we get going, I had asked John to ask our town council. So leading into this meeting, basically we had to notify all the abutters of all these properties and I think the actual owners of the properties. So I asked John if we could consider any parcel if we wanted to basically take any parcel of any of the three options. John, what did the town council have to say?
We didn't get a response about this from town council, but maybe we should go through the three and see if we even want to go to that route, because that would be something maybe for the next meeting.
Okay.
Because that's just, yeah, introducing a fourth option to three existing options.
All right. All right. So I think I think the best thing to do is, John, would you be willing to cover like just the overview of what it is again? I was thinking if we cover the overview of what MBTA communities is about, hopefully 5 minutes, then go into the three, just preview the three options that are passed to us from the zoning advisory committee. And then I start opening it up to comment from the board and then the public.
Sure. I could just use the presentation I gave to the board a couple meetings ago and just kind of skip the history.
Yeah, what was included in the packet, that would be great. That part.
All right, so MBTA communities, multifamily overlay zoning. Skip the history, but these are all the communities that are MBTA communities. The blue is the rapid transit, so they have subway or I think express bus might trigger it, but it might just be subway. Green is commuter rail, and then you have adjacent community, adjacent small town. Hopkinton is over here. It's an adjacent community because we are served by the Southborough train station. So regulations or zoning, they do not force the units to be constructed. The three criteria that we have to follow is of a reasonable size, so 50 acres, and minimum gross density across the entire district, not necessarily for each sub-district, is 15 units per acre. And the capacity allowed must be at least 750 units. So that's not 750 units have to be constructed. It's just that enough land has to be under this zoning that, given the dimensional requirements of the bylaw, 750 units would have to be possible or possibly possible to be constructed. That doesn't sound right, but I'm just going to go with it. This is just overview of what we've done up to this point. And this is option one. So this is the one that went to annual town meeting, and it includes the downtown area, the preserve, and the Carbonis, and 2 residential lots adjacent to Carbonis. There's just a zoom in. And this is the summary of the model that the state provided us, that we plug in all the information and it spits out how we comply with the 3 criteria. So this district would be 58.4 acres, so that would be compliant. It would provide for 814 units, so that's over the 750, and it would have an average density of 16.7 units per acre. So this would comply. And this one also had gone before the state since it was for town meeting. We submitted to the state for their pre-review before town meeting to make sure that I was compliant. They said it would be compliant if adopted. We did not have time to do that on these other 2, given that they were not provided or really thought up by Zach until a couple months ago. So we did not have the chance to send those to the state for a pre-adoption review. The second option, one that Zach came up with recently, and Zach is zoning advisory committee for those who don't know, not a person named Zach, is the Indian Brook and the downtown expanded area. So for the downtown expanded area, we added this parcel, and I believe these 2 parcels, and maybe this parcel up here, just to goose the acreage numbers for these districts, and then Indian Brook Condo Association over here. And this is how it would comply given the model that the state handed down. So 52.3 acres, a total of 771 unit capacity, and 16.7 units per acre over the district. And the third option is the Walcott Valley Downtown Expanded and Upper Cedar Street Modified District. So this would include the Walcott Valley condominium parcel, that same expanded downtown sub-district that was used for the Indian Brook one, and a modified Upper Cedar Street subdistrict, which removes the preserve but keeps Carboni's and the 2 residential lots. And this is how that one would comply of 51.7 acres. So it meets the requirement, 762 unit capacity and 19.2 units per acre. So are we required to build? Do you want me to go through this, Rob, or just kind of leave it there? You're muted, Rob.
I think the first bullet is just important for everybody to hear.
Right.
Other than that,
So-
that's fine.
Yeah, are we required to build these units? No. We would only be compliant if we just adopted it and never built any of the units. The state is not requiring us to build the units. The law is not requiring us to build the units. So it would just need to have the areas rezoned and we would be compliant.
All right, thanks, John.
Yep.
So I'd like to take this kind of in a sequential order. I think for people on the board that have been on the board for several years, we've been talking about MBTA communities for several years at various meetings, and it's not new. To some of the people on the call, this might be new. Something they haven't been spending time on, I'm sure. So I think we just, as a board, we need to recognize that yeah, even though we've been talking about it a long time, the general public probably hasn't. So be accommodating to try to answer any and all questions that the public has. But before we open it up to everybody on the call, does anyone on the board have any questions or comments? It's at this point, I don't know if there's questions that persist, but comments or anything they'd like to say about it? Go ahead, Parker, were you first?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, John, I was just hoping if you could be so kind to clarify what is the definition of upzoning?
Upzoning in planning world would be rezoning a parcel to have a better use potential than current usage.
Okay. And is it fair to say that some of the parcels in the proposed plans would be considered upzone?
I mean, that can be subjective, but if you think about it as being the same zoning as it currently is, but allowing for more uses, then yes.
Yeah, just wanted to zero in on the definition, upzoning, and being able to have more uses for a property. I appreciate you clarifying that.
And just to clarify a little bit more, the quantity of the uses is not necessarily upzoning. It's the quality and quantity compared to the existing uses, if that makes sense.
Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, John, for going over the 3 parcels. I just wanted to kind of cover one of the questions that keeps coming up before we open up to questions later, is that there isn't a lot of unprotected contiguous land available in town. And while the options aren't likely to be developed, I just urge us, when we go back to deliberating in the town, to consider which areas would make sense if they were fully developed, but also considering the state's objectives and, most importantly, what's going to make sense for the town. So I want to make sure that we're not just picking the things that we think are least likely to be developed, because I think we've picked locations that are all currently in use, and we foresee them having a long lifetime in that use. But thinking about what the plan, what makes most sense in a plan in the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Rob. A couple questions, I think, is one, it was option 1, the one that was voted down at the town meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And the second question I have is, or I guess it's more of a comment, is, I mean, I understand that the state is not yet, I guess I'll put in the word yet, requiring us to develop these areas, but I think it may be a slippery slope, as you get it zoned first, and then, I just think of how would I feel if you decided to zone, my residential area as part of this. And I think that's something that we should kind of consider as we're looking at these parcels, because I do know that, I think a lot of people that are in the residential or close to the area, or in the residential areas that are being rezoned or we're considering rezoning, how would we feel if that were our area being rezoned? Would we be as amenable? So that was just a sort of a comment trying to think through this.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for every member of the board, but I think the reality is there's 177 communities, in Hopkinton being one of them, that's talking about zoning for MBTA communities because it was kind of forced upon each individual town. So we're trying to come up with solutions when we didn't set out to as a community, we didn't set out this as our individual objective. It was a state objective at the state level. And so we're trying to find a solution. But yes, I completely understand and can appreciate anyone who lives within these zones or is adjacent to these zones.
Yeah, I mean, for that matter, why not just rezone all of downtown, and let that be, because nobody will redevelop that. So that's kind of a, it's sort of a facetious comment, but you sort of get what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Lucia, go ahead.
I think going off what you just said, Rob, when I look at today's meeting, I see this as something that we have to do. The state says you have to do this. And so I feel like the goal is to choose a plan or plans that we will present at special town meeting in order to comply with the law that the state has said we must comply with. So I think keeping that in mind. And in terms of the input, what I want to say is we welcome everybody's input. And what I think would be most helpful for me would be if residents would tell us which plan they think is best and why. Because at the end of the day, we have to come to the town with a plan in order to comply with the state law.
Thanks, Lucia. Parker, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with actually wholeheartedly with what Lucia just said. Is we stand to lose more than gain if we try to thumb our nose at the state and push for anything but compliance. So possibly, Rob, I don't know if there's any enforcement mechanism we can as part of this meeting, but have any public comment or state which plan they want. That would be super helpful. I like that.
Yeah, I agree. Our goal is to put together the best plan we think that would meet the requirements by the state for town meeting. And ultimately, it's the town meeting vote that's going to determine, like, our vote is going to be the proposal. Then on the town meeting floor, if anyone's been to town meeting, anyone can propose an amendment to what we propose, and ultimately those amendments can be voted on if there's a second. So we're putting together a proposal of what we think is the best plan. And then once it gets to town meeting floor, any variety of things can happen. And ultimately there'll be a vote on anything that is, whether it's the original plan we propose or an amendment to that plan. But I think that's our goal, is to put forward the best plan we think meets the objectives of the residents and voters of town. Go ahead, Vic.
Thanks, Rob. Rob, as you mentioned, and I know that I've been part of the zoning advisory committee as well as planning board. Just want to say that, yes, you're right. It's been forced by the state to, we have to abide to this law. Just to give a little more confidence to the public and the people who are attending out here, is that, we have went through each and every zoning section and we debated a lot. Ted is out here who heads the zoning board on our side, and there was no stone turned around to get this. But unfortunately, we voted down in the first town meeting, but looks like now the state is forcing us back, vote it as a yes, which is kind of I call it as blackmailing, but it's my personal view, but not from the board, just to want to be clear on that. So the question what I have, another one which I should have asked previously, but I just want to check here, maybe John, for this, if you can clarify. What happens if this decline, even this in the special town meeting, or when it comes across, do we get a third chance to vote again, or it's done deal and we face the consequences by the state?
You want me to answer that, Rob?
Go ahead, John. I think the answer is we don't know, but go ahead.
No, I mean, we don't have a limited number of chances to pass this. We can do this every town meeting if you want. But as of December 31st of this year, if we don't have a bylaw adopted by this that's approvable by the state or eligible by the state, we will be considered a non-compliant community, and we will be considered non-compliant until we adopt something that is in conformance with the state laws. So it's not like we only have 2 shots at this and then we're done forever. It's just, well, we'd have to wait until the next town meeting. But
So
we wouldn't be able to have another town meeting between now and the end of the year.
End of the year. So basically it's that we have to vote a yes. That's how I'm hearing it, by force to be compliant. But thanks, John. Thanks for clarifying.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Parker. Do you want to comment? Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add a little context for everybody too, just so everybody on the call knows the area that's outlined in purple in the center of town, the zoning there is already denser than the MBTA zoning requirement by right. So essentially that area in the center would be a wash. I thought it'd be important for people on the call to know that for context.
Thanks, Michael. Ted, do you, I see you're on our screen share, and for everybody, I think everybody knows, Ted is the chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee, but would you like to make any comments? I think by rules, you're going to need to state your name and address, but do you have any comments?
My name is Ted Barker Hook. I am the chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee. I live at 75 Grove Street right here in Hopkinton. I don't know, Rob, what comments would be helpful right now, or if you'd like to keep me in reserve for questions. I guess I could very quickly try to capture what we, the Zoning Advisory Committee, saw our job was here at this second swipe. First, we were responding very much to what you guys on the planning board, at least what we understood that you guys on the planning board asked us to do. That included coming up with multiple options in addition to reconsidering the first option, the one that has been pre-approved by the state but got voted down at town meeting. So that's what we tried to achieve. Our big goals were, number one, be in compliance with the state. There was zero real voice of any kind that said what we should do is not come up with a law and fight the state. There were a couple questions. What happens if we don't come up with a law? But we were in complete agreement that our job was to come up with an overlay and zoning bylaws that would be in compliance. Our second goal, as it was at our first swipe, was to try to come up with a plan that is in the spirit of what the state is going for with regard to public transportation, but also one that would not add to our exploding population in the foreseeable future. We think that all of the plans we put together do a pretty good job of that. Finally, when we were considering properties, and we did consider many, many properties, including things like the golf course, the rod and gun clubs, the YMCA, one of the things that and open space, potentially, places where there were trees. One of the things that we wanted to consider is if and perhaps when there is development, that it would be in areas where there is already a degree of dense housing. So it wouldn't dramatically create new areas of dense housing in town, further exacerbating difficulties we have with growth in the town. So all three plans we have include some areas of already dense housing, condominiums, townhouse type things. So that's my sweeping overview of what we tried to achieve. And if more specific questions come up, or if you have some now, I'm happy to take a crack at them.
All right, Ted. Yeah, there might be specific questions that ask for some zoning advisory committee like thought process. So if you were willing to stay on, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
I do think I'll just start with one comment, and I don't know everybody on the call that's been listening in on our select board meetings, but one of the things we've been cognizant of a board, as Ted mentioned, is try not to choose parcels for MBTA communities that could be redeveloped instantaneously that are above and beyond what they're already zoned for. The select board has kind of said this several times in their past several meetings, that the average home in Hopkinton has $12,500 a year tax bill today, and with the number of new schools we are building and the cost of the schools, that average tax bill is going to go to about a little over $18,000 by 2030. So we have tried to put forward a plan where we don't think it's going to add housing in the near term, being 5 to 10 years, 15 years, maybe even 20. So that's been our approach of what we've tried to do. But we are cognizant of the increased tax bills that are coming, and we didn't want to add a lot of school-age children through MBTA community zoning if we could in the near term. So that was one of the things we tried to do. But at this point, I think it makes sense to open it up to public comment and get anybody's input or anybody's feedback that they want to share on the call. Whoever speaks, you need to give your name and address, and we'll go from there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see raised hands, or John, if you're going to be managing that.
Yeah, I can manage. I am seeing 2 raised hands. And so when people raise their hands, you pop to the top of the list. I will hit the allow to talk button, and you should come up as part of a panel member. But let's try. So Diaz SF is the first one.
Thanks, John. This is Shane Diaz. I live in 5 Birchwood Lane. John did give us a demonstration or a presentation regarding about the new article and the warrant that needs to be passed. And I appreciate what the state is doing and the fact that we have to comply to the state. But in order to do so, I'd rather select an option that will be best needed or best fit for where we live, right? So I live in Indian Brook. 90% to 100% of the surrounding areas is wetlands for conservation area. So looking at it from that aspect, right, that pretty much, I'm not sure, but it negates the extension building. I'm not sure, John, I should have asked you when you presented this. I just also happen to be the president of the board here at Indian Brook, and for the last 24 years. And I mean, I believe in definitely seeing a solution for this, but when we do select a final option or options, plural, I just want to make sure that we definitely look at the best fit sites that we can really have the state move forward and to further develop.
Thanks, Shay. I'm seeing Sunny RWA is next.
Are you able to hear me?
We are now.
Okay, great, thanks. This is Sunny Lakshmi Narayanan. I live in 2 Lehman Lane, Hopkinton, pretty much in the Indian Brook. I think Mr. Diaz is actually the head of the association here. My question is, as Mr. Diaz pointed out, if you look at, I would say the GIS, the boundary limits, most of it is wetlands and there isn't enough space. I haven't seen the earlier versions of where the development could come. I don't know whether you guys shared it, but there will be a significant impact to the wetlands and development as such. You're going to remove trees and you're going to damage the environment. I don't know whether has the town council looked into it? Has the planning and zoning folks looked into it? Because it looks like there could be significant environmental concerns that could arise from this.
So, Sonny, I think the general thinking is that a developer would need to buy each condo in the association, eliminate the condo rules that exist today, and redevelop the whole entire parcel of and not add units to the existing condo association. That's the general way that land would be developed under MBTA communities.
So just to follow up on that, if that is the case, then is there eminent domain going to apply where we have to kind of sell or be forced to sell to the developer?
No. There's no way, there's no precedent of that. Think of I've said this before to other people, but think of the political fallout if at the state, they instituted a bylaw and then they force people out of their homes it would just politically never happen for a politician that would be acceptable.
So what is the way forward? Unfortunately, I missed the last, meetings, but if I know there is like few options, 1, 2, and 3, I guess. One is in downtown, the other one is close to the restaurant, and then the third one is the Indian Brook. So if all 3 options are not, I have actually driven past the Carboni sites even a couple of days ago when I was looking at it. Right next to it, there is a lot of, I would say, again, looks like open space preserved land. I'm not sure exactly whether they are open space preserved for any kind of town purposes. If all 3 fail, then what is the recourse? Is there, or is it something that the state would like to do, or is it just an option that the town has? Or is it mandatory to comply with it to get the state funding?
So I think we've already answered these questions, but let me give it a try. So we're going to move to the next person on the list after this, but there's no requirement from the state that any of these MBTA community units be built. There's no plan that the state is going to take any land by eminent domain. If we do not comply with MBTA communities zoning within our town, yes, we would become ineligible for funding and various grants, and that's the risk. There could be future litigation from the state trying to force the town to comply, and other things we don't know if we don't comply.
Thank you.
Allie, go ahead. Or I'm seeing Donald Jackson as the next on the list.
Hold on, I was gonna try and allow Allie to talk. Allie, if you wanted to talk, can you just raise your hand again? If you don't want to talk, don't raise your hand. Okay. Sorry, for the public, when you lower your hand, you kind of drop off the top of my menu. So if you lower your hand before I promote you to a panelist, I'm gonna have to find you.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead. State your name and address and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Allison Calderara. I'm one of the unfortunate souls who live at Walcott Valley. I think you kind of answered some of my questions when talking to the last gentleman. I was wondering, do the residents get a vote in this? Like, right now you're saying that we're not required to build anything. We just have to zone it so they could build in the future. But if the state comes knocking and says, okay, we're ready to kick you all out, do the residents get any sort of vote in that at all? Or are they just handed a check and wish us good luck finding a new home?
So the only 2 ways it could really happen for Walcott Valley in particular. So Walcott Valley has, as an entire association, has a deed. And it's my understanding, and I don't know if the president of your association's on the call, but it's my understanding 66 2/3% of the condo owners would need to vote to expand the size in the number of units of the association. So yes, you'd get a vote, and it would require a 2/3 vote to change the number of units. And also it would require pretty much everyone to sell their units. And whatever the market rate is, if a developer needed to buy all 100% of those units, the market that would drive the cost per unit up, and those would become worth more to you as an owner. Would be my. I don't want to give financial advice, but that would be I think that's generally accepted knowledge, that the more uses for land, the land becomes more valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just get scared about having to find something new that I could afford when I'm trying to retire. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Donald Jackson.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Donald Jackson. I live at 4 Lincoln Street in Hopkinton. So first off, I'd like to acknowledge that both the Planning Board and the Zoning Advisory Committee were trying to navigate a very challenging, a very narrow window. I think in some of our previous meetings, I've raised concerns about the lack of infrastructure in the Upper Cedar Street area, where option 1 would place a large number of units. What, if any, consideration was given to the existing infrastructure around some of the other alternatives? And if a developer was to build in any of these parcels, how much of the burden of upgrading that infrastructure would fall on the developer versus either abutters or the town ratepayers as a whole?
Typically, John, you can maybe help me a little bit, but let me start. So Cedar Street in general, I think I said a few minutes ago, we tried to select properties or parcels that we didn't think would be developed in the near term because of we didn't want to add a lot of school age children to the MBTA communities. So not having infrastructure for Cedar Street makes it appealing that there's no infrastructure. So the developer, it would just cost more, which makes the business case to redevelop down on Cedar Street more expensive. So we think that just puts it makes it financially less palpable to put an MBTA community project in those areas because there isn't infrastructure and water and sewer. It just makes it more expensive. So that business case, it becomes harder to be a profitable business case. And in other projects, part of any type of site plan review is the infrastructure. And it's really the burden of the applicant, which would be any new developer, to ensure there's enough water and sewer capacity. John, can you help me with that? Like, we typically don't get into that type of questions.
Yeah. So I probably should have gone through the presentation because a lot of these questions were actually in the presentation because they're very popular questions and people ask them all the time. Developers would be responsible for 100% of the upgrades to utilities. The town would not be responsible for installing or upgrading to utilities to serve any new developments. That would be entirely the developer's responsibility. Sorry, there was a 2-part question. Was there another part?
Well, I guess, yeah, I also, for me personally, obviously my major concern is about the proposal that places a large number of units in proximity to my residence, but I'm sure for others, understanding what the potential impacts are for some of the alternatives is probably equally pressing for them. And, I confess, I don't really understand don't know what the infrastructure is for Indian Brook and Walcott Valley, but my understanding is outside of the center of town, a lot of our town is on well and septic, and adding high density housing in any of those areas presumably would cause a great deal of impact to any adjacent residents.
With that, there'd be an assessment. I don't know. I don't want to guess at the impact, but I think just the more strain on any type of public utility by more housing, it obviously adds more to the system. So that all has to be factored in and calculations done. But I would assume you are correct that it would put more strain on the systems that are there. Ken Wisemetzel, would you like to go?
There we go. Okay, I'm unmuted now. I think I'll set. Ken Weismantel, 145 Ash Street. I'm the former chair of Zoning Advisory Committee and also Planning Board. I have 5 points I'd like to make tonight. The first point is I think you need to consider what the value of the property is to a developer. So look across the other side of the table as the planning board members and see who would be applying for this permit. Right now, a developer in Hopkinton will pay $40,000 to $60,000 per unit for the opportunity to build a apartment on a piece of property. So if you're at 15 units per acre, that comes out to 600,000 at 40,000, and it's 900,000 per acre if it's up to 60K units. For example, the Legacy Farms and also the Windsor development off of Lumber Street were all sold for the raw land at $40,000 an acre. And on top of that, the Windsor had to put in his own septic system in, so it was profitable at that area. Your downtown project, where the Hopkinton Drug is rumored to be sold for $60,000 a unit, though the infrastructure is right there for that. So if you look at that alone, the value of the Carboni property is significantly less current value than what a developer would buy it for. So that is prime developable land. I would agree with you on all the condo projects that the condos have more value to the current owners than the $600,000 an acre or $900,000 an acre. Those condos are worth a lot more than that. Therefore, it would not be economic for a developer in the current state of way to buy that land. Second point is on number of students that we're talking about. I read somewhere where somebody on the planning board said that you ought to look at the Legacy Farm apartments to try to project the number of students that would go into this particular project. I would like to remind you that of the 240 units that were at the Legacy Farms portion, 2/3 of those are one-bedroom apartments. Very few people have kids of school age that are living in the same one-bedroom apartment. Also, the Legacy Farms unit was designed with the help of the planning board to be a senior or older person unit. There is no playground there. There's no play structure. The pool is a saltwater pool. All things, the gym facilities are set up for senior or single parent type, or singles or single parent divorcees. So that's what that unit is. So if you looked at the number of school kids in the Windsor off of Lumber Street, which was a 40B, you will see a significantly higher number of kids because the percentage of 2-bedroom and even 3-bedroom apartments within that is significantly higher. So there's a lot more kids off of Lumber Street with that unit. So I think if you use the Legacy Farms number of students, you'll grossly underestimate the number of kids that you might be putting into it. Third point, the downtown density, parking is going to be much more of a problem. We tried to encourage downtown development by requiring, as you know, that only half of the units required for businesses have to build parking, because we had plenty of parking around that. As this gets built in downtown, and it will, you're going to see much more of a parking problem. So I would suggest you start thinking about that one. My fourth point is that you have the will of the town meeting. Option 1 was voted down. Going back, I think, is an insult to town meeting to go back. It's not because it was just enough education or anything like that. There was enough people that did not really support that, and it didn't even pass, not on the normal 2/3, but on a 50% rule. And my last point is, I support the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. We want to comply it. We want to get the grants. We want to keep this Commonwealth off our backs, but we're not really in the business of wanting to encourage building housing, because as our school superintendent said, our high school and our junior high cannot support additional students as they're currently configured. And quite frankly, we spent all of our money on elementary schools in the last couple town meetings. So given all that, I personally can only support option 2. And I would, if you pick 1 or 3, you will have one vocal opponent at town meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Ursula Hunt, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ursula Hunt. I'm at 6 Walcott Valley. And I think that any of the condo ideas should not pass. As a condo owner, like, I don't know if anybody's been reading about what's happened in Miami with zombie condos and developers buying up that the 2/3 or whatever to get control of the condo board, to then say, okay, well, now these other condos that, like, if you didn't sell yours when the developer was buying them, are worth nothing now, and then turning them into whatever they want. So I feel like if it is a condo plotted area, it shouldn't pass just because of the possibility of a developer doing that.
Thanks, Ursula, for your comment. Vidya, is that multiple? I don't know. Vidya? I'll go with that.
Yes, this is
it's Vidya Sagar.
Yeah, this is Vidya Sagar. I am from Preserve 43 Forest Lane. I just have one point to add up. Is this option 1 was voted down in the last town meeting. So I just wanted to reconsider it again back, presenting it again. Is it a viable solution to go back again and ask for the vote for the option 1? Second thing is that, is there anything we can do to exclude the private condominiums, pick some parcel from option 1 and or any other parcel from 2 or 3 to exclude the private condominiums, and see if there is any other rollout option. And also, if we are non-compliance by December 31st, we always have an option of presenting a good choice and get back to compliance in the next year towns meeting, right? So these are the comments.
I'm trying to go through you had some questions in there.
Yes, the first one is, I just wanted to just emphasize saying that it was voted down in the last meeting. I just wanted to really value the people's voice and votes over there. And that's a comment more about, and just give the importance on the voting on the people's voice. And the second thing is there any option where we can exclude the private condominiums and come up with an option who doesn't have any private condominiums as part of parcels? That's a question. And third one is also a question.
So let me answer that first. So right now before us, no, there's no proposal that doesn't have any condo associations in it. What was your last question?
If we vote it down, even this time, we will be non-compliance from the state, but we'll still have the chance of next year town voting and be compliance. And is that true? Like it's not like forever we'll be non-compliance, right?
So yes, if we do not have MBTA communities vote approved at town meeting, at this special town meeting, we will be non-compliant. Will we be able to get in compliance at a future town meeting in 2025 or 2026 or any year thereafter? I believe so.
Yeah.
We just don't know what will happen or what the ramifications from the state will be in that intermediate time. They've said they would take away any potential funding from any grant programs that we could be eligible for as a town.
Yeah.
The Attorney General has said they would file litigation against the town, which may, I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't think any of us do, but it's not like there's no downside. I just wanted to be clear. There is some downside of not having it there is downside by not having it in place by this December 31st.
Sure. Thank you, Robert. I think the second one so there's no option which doesn't have a private condominium as part of parcel, right? That's what I just wanted to get it again back.
Yep, there's no option on the agenda for tonight that has no condo association. Does that mean we could come back next week potentially? I think it'd be very difficult to do that, but there's no option on the agenda for tonight that doesn't have a condo association included in it.
Thank you, Robert. And pre-adoption is not necessary for representing that in the final town hall meeting, right? We don't need a pre-adoption like as we have the option one pre-adoption.
I think our goal is to have a single option for town meeting, or at least I think that would be the preference. I don't want to speak for all the board yet because they're going to have say in that, but that would be, I think, my preference. As I'm going to be speaking for the board at town meeting. But Lucia, go ahead.
I think Elise joined the call, so if she can raise her hand and we can add her as a panelist.
Thanks, Lucia. All right, Allison.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yay.
You can just say your name and address and we'll go from there.
Yes, my name's Allison Retman. I live at 26 Walcott Valley Drive, so one of the affected condominium complexes. Like my neighbor Allison who spoke earlier, I have a lot of concern about where would we go if we were effectively forced out of our homes as part of this plan when our houses are already some of the most affordable housing in Hopkinton. And looking on Zillow right now, the places that are on sale at Walcott Valley Drive are $300,000 less than anything else on there, with houses ranging up into the multi-millions. People forced out are not necessarily going to be able to buy back.
Through the chair.
That is our home. And when I watched the zoning board meeting, I was really struck at the laser focus on slowing development. And what was explicitly discussed was that the more high-value condo associations are of greater usefulness in the current plans because they are less attracted to developers and likely to hold out longer before selling. And you also stated that a pro for Walcott Valley's inclusion instead, despite being of lower monetary value, is that we have fewer units and therefore there are fewer of us to come to town meeting and vote against it.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Parker.
Yeah, point of order. I believe this point's already been addressed of being out of, or the perception of the state with eminent domain taking over.
This is not eminent domain that I'm speaking of. What I'm speaking of is...
Hold on. the state already, regardless of MBTA communities, has the ability to take any property. And so we've addressed this. And Robert, I understand the spirit of what we're trying to do as part of this discussion. But is there any way we can kind of like, if the point is already being addressed as part of a meeting, we could, you know, possibly folks have or introduce new ideas that haven't already been covered today? Just so
I'm sorry, but you're misinterpreting what I was trying to say, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to complete my point.
I think for today, I think I'd rather be more inclusive of all comment than limit somebody that has probably never been on a planning board meeting before. So Allison, just go ahead.
Thank you. It's actually 75% of us would have to vote and then to sell. I am aware of all of that. What was just really striking to me is that it keeps being presented as you will not be forced. This is your choice. This is not a fait accompli. When you actually listen to the zoning board speaking, it's spoken with the understanding that we will sell eventually, and it's a matter of how long we hold out, and therefore what the value of that is to the town in slowing development, that we're essentially being used as bulwarks when we are people who live here. And I really appreciated Karen Will's comment earlier where she acknowledged that that's actually a pretty hard thing to live with within a community, to know that you have that hanging over your head. I feel like it's being presented in two ways, where on the one hand, it's don't worry, this is all under your control. When it's being discussed in zoning, it's the expectation this will happen.
Allison, I just looked this up earlier before the meeting, but could you refresh my memory? How many units are in Walcott Valley?
I believe it's a little over 60.
I think it's 66. Yeah. So it would take 50 votes in change, and it would take all 66 people to sell. Just, but I obviously heard another member in that lives in Walcott Valley saying there's concern once they get to 50 votes, the remaining properties, that would be a challenge.
I understand your reasoning. I understand why slowing development is important and the strain on town resources. I understand the consequences of not complying with the state. What I feel is that these condo communities are essentially being used as a sacrifice for the town. And that's not really
a good feeling.
No, not at all. We live here. We were really happy to get the place that we live in. So yeah, anyway, that's my piece.
All right, thank you. Dale, you're next on the list. If you could just state your name and address. I don't know if Dale walked away from the computer. We can't hear you, Dale, if you're talking. Do we have the possibility to go to the next person in the list and put Dale back in the queue, John? Can we go to Joyce?
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Joyce Michelle. I'm at number 40 Walcott Valley Drive. And my initial question was very well answered by Ken Weismantel, which was exactly what are the metrics for how a developer would regard a property, you know, what would they pay for it and stuff. That was extremely helpful. But then he went on to say some other things that sort of confused me. I don't know if he's still around to clarify it, but he said of the three plans, he would only go for, I don't remember which he said, the second or the third plan, but I've heard the plans presented in different orders at different times. So I was wondering, he seemed so well informed and so committed to a particular plan, if he would clarify which of the plans he thought was preferable. Because I didn't follow that.
I don't really want to take the the approach of. I guess I'll do it this time. Go ahead. I don't like this approach of having people from attending the meeting give answers. But Ken, go. Why don't you voice your opinion for Joyce's benefit?
I supported option 2 because it does not include the Carboni land, which is basically underdeveloped and is being offered, it's assessed at like $2 million and it'd be worth over $6 million to a developer at the low end of that unit. So I do not believe that any condo would ever get enough owners to sell. And quite frankly, the value of the condos is significantly above the $600,000 an acre that would require this to be financially viable for a developer. Both the Indian Brook and also Walcott Valley have both water and sewer infrastructure too. But I've answered your point. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess what I didn't understand, the one that he said was preferable, was that the one that included Indian Brook?
Yes.
Okay, that was, and the other thing I didn't understand was he said a lot about that Legacy Farms was not contributing a lot of children because it had so many one-bedroom units. And I was wondering if he had possibly misspoken, because I know there are huge numbers of children at Legacy Farms, and I think it's
So Legacy Farms is made up of a lot of different housing types or dwelling unit types. Within Legacy Farms, there's fundamentally an apartment building or buildings.
Okay.
And those are primarily one bedroom, is what he was referring to.
Right. I don't know what of the various condo complexes, are any of them primarily one bedroom? I know Walcott Valley has 12 one bedroom and 54 two bedroom.
I believe so. I'm pretty sure, and I see Eric Wieland on the list. He's the president of the Preserve Association, but I'm pretty sure the Preserve is all two bedroom, and Indian Brook I think is a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go back to the board for a minute. Michael, go ahead.
I just want to remind people, try to stay in the four corners of the discussion. We're getting a little off track with some of the comments. So.
Thanks, Michael. Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks. Just to that point, so Legacy Farms at itself is a much higher than the town average, but the apartments there are about national average, about 20 children per 100 units. Windsor is in total is below the town average. I think it's about 50 children per 100 units, whereas the town average is a little above 60, just for those contexts.
Thanks, Matthew. I think for everybody's benefit on the call, as part of MBTA community zoning, we cannot limit number of bedrooms within MBTA community zoning. We cannot limit MBTA zoning to plus 55 communities. So we can't put any age restrictions on MBTA community zoning. We can't put any number of bedrooms restrictions on MBTA zoning. So I think those are two important points. Eric Wieland, go ahead.
There we go. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, this is Eric Wieland. I'm at 13 Forest Lane. I'm on the board here at the Preserve. And I've sat in at many meetings, and I just want to voice my opinion again. I do not believe you should be putting any properties up that have people living on the properties. We've requested twice now through our attorneys not to be considered, and we have not received a response from the planning board or the select board from our requests from our attorneys. And we just don't want to be rezoned, and I think we have that right to request that. And I agree with Allison at Walcott Village. The same. We live here. You can call it a condo, but it's a home to us. And we live here, and we don't know. And again, I've asked this question in the past, and eminent domain would be political suicide. I agree. But we don't know what the state's going to do when you offer up properties that seem that they won't be developed for 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. The state's going to react to that. And no one can answer what's going to happen. I strongly urge the planning board to look at properties that don't have Hopkinton homeowners on the property. That's what you should be doing, and not offering up places where we live and we're bringing up families. I'm raising my grandson here. I want to be here for a while. And it's very concerning. And I just wanted to speak again about that because I think we have to come together on this and respect the people that live on the properties that you people are selecting. It's very, very difficult for us.
Thanks, Eric.
And that's, yep.
All right. Parker, would you like to speak? Parker, you ready? Oh, go ahead.
Looks like Parker dropped off the call, so he must have just been trying to rejoin.
Oh, he looks like she's showing as a raised hand to me, but let me give my input. So for anybody on the call that knows me, I've lived in Hopkinton a long time, I think since 1986, so 38 years. Went to high school, went to school, elementary school. Part of why I'm on the planning board is to try to ensure Hopkinton maintains this rural kind of character and charm. Do not want large scale dense housing in Hopkinton. And I think, but in this case, the state is forcing upon us to put together a proposal. So I think it's the planning board's I think we have to put together our best proposal for town meeting and then let the town meeting vote on it. So I don't think it's a viable path to say, hey, nope, we're just not the planning board is going to decide for all of the will of the town. We don't want to put something forward, but we need to put together our best proposal. So that's what we've been doing for 2.5 years, is working on this. This is not new. These discussions are not new. I see more people have joined, raised their hand. So before I continue, why don't we take some of these comments? Cheryl Gladstone, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Cheryl Gladstone, 9 Forest Lane in the Preserves. I just want to reiterate what Ken was saying. There was a very large gathering for 3, I believe, days, maybe 4, I don't know. It was a bad memory. And, there was a vote on this. And to put the preserve back into the vote makes no sense to me. Like it really is insulting. There are a lot of people who, went to that meeting to support the preserve throughout the town. We did gain over 50% of the vote, and we basically declined the use of our property for the purpose of trying to fake a adherence to the new law. And I doubt very much when I'm sorry, but I doubt very much when you went before the state and proposed our property in the first place, that you mentioned to them that there's no infrastructure here and that the property is currently in use. There are people living here who would be displaced, and would have, you know, in this economy and with the lack of housing across the nation. So we're just going to displace the people who live there now so that you can build housing to satisfy the state. And how it turns out, I don't know. But in most of the meetings, when you have the public involved, the statement is you don't have to worry about eminent domain. You don't have to worry about these things. It's 30 years, it's 20 years, whatever. But then there have been some statements made by certain people in the newspaper and in you know, some public forum where they said the state wants to move quickly on this. Move quickly on what? On developing property for 750 units? I don't really understand the sort of the communication that's going on with respect to this, but I do truly think the state has some intention to ensure that you know, these properties are developed. So I'm not really understanding why you would offer up properties that are already developed and there are people living there. And we are residents, and you know, like Ken said, it is very insulting that you would put our property back up for a vote.
So with the MBTA communities bylaw, different towns are considered differently. So there's, I think, 11 towns are considered rapid transit communities. And so they had to have their MBTA zoning overlay map done by December 31st, 2023. So all of those towns put together a map and complied besides Milton. Milton feels they shouldn't be a rapid transit community, so they're fighting it in court. The Attorney General of Massachusetts has filed a lawsuit against them. But I think the point I'm trying to make is those towns considered rapid transit community are all in and around Boston. And all of those towns already had areas of land with very dense housing where they put an MBTA zoning overlay district, by and large, over areas that were already built to that density. So what is it going to do? It's in effect going to add no additional housing units because they made an overlay map where that housing already exists. So that is that's basically what happened. And so other towns that have MBTA community requirements are trying to do similar things. Not every town, but most towns, if they already have land that has that density of housing, that's what we tried to do to the first order. We tried to look at the Windsor Apartments. We tried to look at the apartment complex and Legacy Farms. And because of the special nature of those apartment complexes, being in the Osmond open space mixed use development district, we couldn't consider Legacy Farms. Windsor being a 40B project and all of them be considered affordable housing, we couldn't include that. So we're trying to go to the next options and options we don't think are going to be readily developed because we don't think there's a financial business case for some of these options.
You know, again, I think, you know, you're sort of making decisions and impacting certain residents of the town. And I'm sorry, I just don't feel that you've thought through the impact to people and the town thoroughly, because I do think the state is very underhanded, and there will be something that they'll do.
Do you think there's any proposal we could put forward that wouldn't impact anyone in town?
I think there are potentially, I mean, I'm not an expert on this town, but I think there are potentially areas that are currently unused that could be developed. And then we get into the argument that, oh, well, it's not really near the train. Well, we're an adjacent community. And what we got in some of the other previous meetings was, oh, well, the spirit of the law, we wanted to build something that is near the train, or, you know, convenient near the train. Well, that's not the law. The law for the adjacent community is not the same as a non-adjacent community. And therefore, you could go further and you could have busing to the train. So yeah, there's undeveloped. I'm sure there's undeveloped property or vacant property that you could use. What we got in one of the last meetings was, oh, well, we really want to leave some of that vacant property, for commercial use. Okay, so you want to diss the residents of Hopkinton in order to have potential commercial usage. And I don't know. I'm sorry, but I feel like we already went through this at town meeting, and we're all being brought back in to fight for our rights in this town. And I think it's pretty unfair, particularly for the preserve, because we were the ones that were, on the amendment for town meeting in May.
Thanks, Cheryl. I encourage everyone, not just people on this call, but everyone. I think local politics are maybe the most important kind of politics. So attending town meeting, I think, is extremely important. So I encourage everyone to attend town meeting. Parker, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think historically, you have to put this in context, what's happening right now, folks. Zoom out for a second. 2008 happened, right? With the economic collapse. And what you had was essentially a collapse of the housing market from a new construction perspective. Literally, the market bottomed out, and many people lost their homes. There were foreclosures. A lot of single family folks lost their homes, but also what you then saw was folks that had capital and the ability to acquire land started to buy up, for example, old apartment buildings and turn them into luxury condos or turn them into, luxury managed buildings. So you saw this happen all over the place. And simultaneously, you saw developers see that as a huge market opportunity and invest a ton in these large high-rise, or not high-rises, but these large managed buildings that we see going up all over the state. And why this is significant is because there was a huge incentive to have these expensive, high rent, high cost of rent places, because you made a ton of money, not cater to what planning folks call middle housing. And also on the actual home side, on single family homes, folks like, you may hear like Toll Brothers on here a lot. People that makes like luxury homes, we're talking like four bed, 4 bath, 4,000 square foot kind of homes. They never really stopped building because there's still a market from 2008 on for those kinds of homes. And look at Hopkinton today. What you have a luxury managed building with like Windsor. You have massive 4 bed, 4 bath, 4,000 square foot homes everywhere. And folks like myself that are millennials who, I'm not rich, wanted to buy into Hopkinton. I got lucky to be able to buy in here, but a lot of people are not able to. And one of the reasons is because of middle housing. And so when Charlie Baker passed this law back in 2021, he only passed it because, and this is all the news, you can read this on WGBH.com, he felt there was a loose enforcement mechanism and his administration wasn't going to, have any teeth to do so. And instead, what's happened is Charlie Baker was not reelected, and we have the Healy administration, who decided to take a harder tack in enforcing MBTA communities. And the reason is because they wanted to create that option of middle housing. Now, they could have done, because the state always has the power to enforce building, but they didn't pursue legislation at the state level to actually do that. Instead, they did like the middle ground, which in the face of doing nothing and having a housing shortage that we have in Massachusetts, or in the face of forcing people to do and create homes, they did the middle ground, which is, let's use this plan, the MBTA communities, to create zoning districts where if people want the choice to sell their home down the line, they can, or cities and towns can create special, districts, with the idea of them being, in the spirit of the law was to create them near towns that have T-stops. Then folks might be encouraged to, use public transportation instead of us having to do tons of capital infrastructure projects to build new roads. So that's how we got here is, we had a change of administration and one that wanted to pursue this. Now, how this figures to Hopkinton is we as a town, if you look at us across all other towns in the state, are pretty much number one in terms of investment that we've had to do for education and taking out capital bonds to create homes, to create schools. And that's because the homes have been created, the influx of population, partially because a planning board a few boards ago allowed for legacy farms to move forward. And so now that we have like caught up with that growth and we're at a point to where the current, after the capital projects are done with the new schools, we'll probably be able to sustain at a decent rate and not have to do these massive projects. Folks, it's a really bad idea to want to build or allow with MBTA communities an open parcel. Because if we do only open parcels for the MBTA communities plan, what's going to happen? There's an opportunity to take mixed use, create a ton of condos, which is assuredly going to add a ton of kids to the schools, which is going to increase your property taxes because we'll have to what? Take out new capital bonds to build more schools. So this is the whole point for all the folks that are part of the condo communities. Let me tell you, as a board member, I can't do this. You can put my house in if you want as part of the MBTA communities. I'm all for it. I actually think, because it's what's called upzoning. Whenever you take any kind of property and add additional uses for it, creates the ability for a property developer to then come in and do what? More opportunity, more things to ship, which creates more value. So this actually creates more value for you as a potential homeowner, number one. But number two, all of the property associations that if you wanted to actually buy them out, it would wipe out any capital benefits that a developer would have by, essentially developing what would otherwise have been a open parcel. So that's what we're trying to do, folks. This isn't a conspiracy. Nobody's taking away property rights. You actually have a potential to increase the value of your property as part of this. What we're really trying to do is not see people taxed out of their homes. And I said this at town meeting, I'll say it again. Saw a grown man cry before me who said, getting taxed out of my home in Hopkinton, and I'm 5 generations here. That's what we're trying to avoid. And, I respect folks in being afraid, unnerved, or whatever. But guys, we're not fools. You have folks that are really smart people on this board that are trying to see for the best interests of this town. Truly, we have the best interest in heart. And so respectfully, we're doing our best here and we're not trying to hurt you. You can put this on my house, Cheryl, if you want to.
I think that's a great idea. Respectfully, I'm not a fool.
Please.
And I really do think maybe you should put up your property along with
I can't. It's a conflict of interest.
In the amount of acreage that on which you could build the 750 units. I think that's a great idea. So we've given you an idea.
I can't. So, but the point is this: I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of this.
To give ideas of land. I just gave you one.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to keep reiterating what, Rob's been making the point about. We are not doing this with any secret plan in the background or any coordination with the state other than the fact that these rules were kind of forced upon us. The entire intention of this board and zoning advisory is to have the little impact on the town as possible. So when people come up here and comment, I think they need to keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. John, do you know if some of the people that hands are raised, I don't know if they've ever left the list or if they're come back on the list?
Yeah, some of them have come back on. I don't know if some of them have lowered their hand. So we can call on them again if you'd like, and then just try and suss that out. I'll call on the new people first.
I don't think we've heard from Dale's iPad.
Well, if I could work the technology, you'd be able to hear from me the last time. I think maybe you can hear it this time.
Yep, we got you.
Yay, Dale Danahy, 25 East Main Street. So I live next to the Walcott Valley condos. And I'm well aware of all the things that you've been trying to do. I know your first step is to comply with the law. My worry is, as people have said, so what happens when the state wants you to comply with the law and not just put it on paper, but they want this stuff to be built because people, can't afford housing in Massachusetts. So how do we comply? What happens when the state says, okay, you got 5 years, figure it out, build these condos that you've just put, this area that you've just put down on paper? Can you guarantee that they're not going to ask that? You keep saying it's a 12 to 20-year development, don't worry about it. Well, someday you're going to have to pay the piper.
Dale, you're right. None of us are fortune tellers, but the state is not a real estate developer per se. They're not.
No.
They're not building. So say, like, for example, say any parcel of land in Hopkinton got zoned as MBTA communities. It would take that current landowner to either decide to build an MBTA communities themselves, a project, or to sell it to somebody else that was going to build it. So it would take, for the most part, it would take a transaction of a sale of land to somebody that's a developer that's going to develop it. The state's not going to be in that process. Like, how is the state going to be in that? I don't see any way the state's involved in that process.
They could offer grants. They could offer money to a developer to make it worth their while to do it. You can't tell me they aren't going to do that. How do you know?
Is that possible? Like I said, we're not fortune tellers. Like, is that possible? Potentially. I guess I don't know.
So I think when Karen was offering tongue in cheek, let's develop downtown and use that. I think that's a great idea. People don't want to see their property changed. I agree with all the condo owners. I don't want to see it in my backyard. I don't want to see these people hurt, and that's what we're going to do potentially. And so make the whole business, take 50 acres of business downtown, look around South Street, pick up business that isn't going to hurt somebody and rezone them. I don't think they care.
Thanks, Dale.
Option 4.
I just have to add this, Rob. Most of downtown is already zoned for higher density housing, correct?
Yes, but the land area is not like the land area that's zoned for downtown for that density of housing is not over 50 acres. It's smaller.
It's already zoned for a high density housing, and somebody hasn't come and bought all of it and developed it. That's the point. It's zoning.
Yep. Good point. Of Fiona's, maybe Igor R.
Hello, Igor Rubizin, 49 Forest Lane. So I'm a bit confused about something. I would like kind of you to give a bit more detail. Option 1 and option 3 both include Cabrones restaurant, as far as I can tell. Now, we know for a fact that the owner of that land actually wants to sell it. He had the offer on the table contingent on the passing of the previous law back in May. That didn't happen, but I'm going to assume that the offer is still there. So if the board's plan is to kind of try and delay the actual construction, why do we include that land again?
I think that's a good point. I don't want to speak for the whole board, but I'll speak for myself. I am not in favor of including that land and our goal for what we bring to town meeting.
Understood. Thank you.
Fiona, go ahead.
There are certain communities, housing that are considered.
Could you start by saying your name and address?
Okay, Fiona Kayemba, 31 Forest Lane, in the Preserve. When the consideration of housing to include people who are homeowners, did the board consider the areas where there are properties that are 1 to 2 million, which again would be a disincentive to developers, that instead, if you're taking a vast of 30 acres with these high property values, to include those in the MBTA? Is there a reason why they were not considered? Secondly, there are other areas that are business, which I guess would also not be conducive. For example, the elderly homes like Golden Pond, and there's another one
Is there a reason why those were not also considered as an overlay?
I don't. I don't know if Ted, you're able to speak to this, or Vic, you're on the zoning advisory committee. Like, I wasn't in all the meetings to understand the entire conversation about every parcel across town.
Hey, Rob, this is Ted. I can try a little bit, but I also cannot remember every discussion about every parcel around town. I think that for any resident that is raising questions about other properties, those are completely valid questions. We spent a lot of time talking about a lot of properties. And for all the residents who are pointing out we cannot know the future, I agree with you too. We cannot know the future. We were doing the best we could to pick properties that we thought were unlikely to be developed in the near future, that the only way they could be developed was if the owners themselves chose to sell them at presumably quite a high price. With that said, we also had to consider, what if the owners did decide to sell them? What would that do to the way we think about our town and development in our town? So one reason we did include condominium areas was if the owners did decide to sell them, it's an area already with high density housing. So it would not add massive amount of housing if they did get sold. Conversely, if a business chose to sell, if they chose to, again, we don't know if they would have. Well, now we are losing potentially commercial income from our tax base. And secondly, that is doing nothing but adding population to the town because nobody lives in a business. And we certainly thought about open land where there's no housing. And to us, that seemed the worst option, not because we worried that we were stepping on someone's rights. In fact, every time something is rezoned, we are adding to people's property rights because it expands the number of potential buyers who could buy it. The real downside to zoning land that is undeveloped is it's one of the cheapest parts of land to buy, making it most likely for developers to come in and dramatically increase our town population and, even more importantly, our school populations. We did talk about Golden Pond for a little bit. One real concern is if it did get developed, it struck us as an absolute traffic nightmare where it was sitting in town on a road that is already a traffic nightmare. We thought about South Street, where there are businesses. I think I've already hit on some of our concerns with South Street in losing potential commercial revenue, but it also struck us as a potential traffic nightmare in a section of town that is already dealing with traffic nightmares. So hopefully that touches on some of our other considerations of other properties in town, but it would be really difficult for me to go through every property we touched on and remember every discussion we had and every pro and con point about them. I hope that helps a little bit.
I mean, I guess for the condominium owners, the problem we have is that single family homes like Highland Park or all the other areas in town were not even put on the map at all. So if you take, a aggregate of like all those homes in the area, if they're like between 1.5 to 2 million, that in itself would be a disincentive for a developer in order to have to buy out all those surrounding homes. It's much more expensive than condominiums. Our discussions with the previous planning board was that the reason why condominiums were chosen is that because we have planning meetings it's I think 75 majority, that we as a block would be the ones to vote. As condominium owners, we don't want to have that responsibility that a developer over the years will contact us and say, this is a proposal we're having, and then we would have to meet to vote it down. That's something that we don't want to have. And we expressed that by our vote in the first meeting in May, and it seems again that it's been ignored. So now we're in a position again to rally up all our friends and neighbors and children in our schools to turn up on November 18th to vote it down, and then planning board will find themselves again in the same position of non-compliance.
Fiona, it's not the planning board that'd be in non-compliance, it's the town of Hopkinton.
Then the town will be in non-compliance because we've been put in this position again of going to all our neighbors, rally all our friends and the children's friends, that all of you show up to town meeting because our vote was not heard the first time. We need you again the second time.
So which plan do you like?
What's the plan that has the downtown area? Because then there are no residents there as of now.
All the plans have a downtown area.
Have it.
In the original plan, what's the one which had the pharmacy that closed? That was on the board back in May.
There's three plans there's three plans in front of us, three options in front of us. All of them include the downtown area. All of them include what was Hopkins and Drug.
Yes.
I'm saying all three plans before us include that land.
Yeah, but no, they all have condos, but they don't have single family.
All right. We're gonna move to thanks Fiona. We're gonna move to Vadasagara.
I think I already expressed my.
Would you mind just putting your hand down if you don't have additional comment on the Zoom?
Sure, thank you.
Let's go to Sharon Reynolds. Sharon, if you unmute yourself, you say your name and address.
I'm so sorry. Sharon Reynolds, 6 Lehman Lane. Did you hear anything that I said? Probably not, right? Okay.
No.
Okay, so I understand the complexity of this issue and the urgency that the planning board is feeling. It just seems to me that by picking 3 zones, that each of them including a condo community, it's picking the maximum amount of people that are going to be affected. We have 112 units here and only a 67% voting to change the bylaws. And I also had the concern about the person who talked about zombie buyers. I brought this up with someone on the planning board before, John. You could get 8 developers working together to buy out 75 units here. I believe that would be 67%, and they could just take it over. Now, maybe that's really unlikely, but the threat hanging over us, all of us in these condo communities, is really difficult. And trying to minimize the I'm not saying that right, being able to develop our condos. But again, I just want to say it puts more people at risk of disrupting their lives in a significant way. And as much as I love undeveloped land with maybe trees and vegetation on it, I am really wondering if something should be revisited so that so many people aren't disrupted. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Cheryl, Cheryl, your hand's still raised, and Dale's iPad hand is still raised. Cheryl, do you have anything you'd like to say?
On my Cheryl Gladstone, because on my screen it says my hand's lowered. I apologize. I can.
Okay.
Try to do it again. Hang on.
Dale's iPad, your hand's showing is raised. Do you have any additional comments you'd like to make?
Mine's showing that it's lowered, so no, I do not.
All right, thank you. So I think for everybody on the board, I think it goes, the MBTA community's zoning challenge has been probably the most difficult challenge since I've been on the board since 2019, because it's not something the town has is in general. The will of the town was let's not go do this. It's something the state is forced upon us. So like all the representatives from all the different communities that work in our state are voted into our state legislature. Those votes matter, and they voted this law in effect. And so now we're forced to try to come to a solution. So we're going to put together what we think is the best proposal, and we're going to discuss it here in the next bit, and it's going to go before town meeting. And so I encourage everybody on this call. I encourage you to get your friends, any of your neighbors. I encourage anyone to attend town meeting. I think attending, being part of the local kind of government process at town meeting is extremely beneficial for the will of the town. So I encourage everybody to attend. But let me, before I continue, somebody just raised their hand. Bill Munch, do you want to go?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, Bill Minch, 16 Weybridge Lane of Indian Brook. And yeah, I appreciate all the comments that have been previously made, and I also appreciate all the work that the Zoning Advisory Committee and the Planning Board have done to confront this issue. My one question is, and I'm kind of against this in the spirit, I think that the state has kind of put us in a difficult position, because I think the intent is to create more affordable housing throughout the whole state, and I think they're just going the wrong way. But my one question is what is the opinion of our two representatives, Karen Spilka and James Arena DeRosa? Have they had any input on this as far as the town, especially if we decide to vote this down? Will they back us so we don't get these any of these fines or withhold grants? And so that's basically my point.
So I don't. They so I can answer the last part. They don't have any I would say jurisdiction to prevent withholding of any grants from my knowledge. John, I'm not seeing you on this share screen, but are you here?
I'm here.
Do you have any additional information? Like there's no, our representatives, I don't even know if they were our representatives when this law went into effect, this bylaw went into effect.
I mean, I believe Spilka was. I would have to look at when Arena DeRosa was elected.
Yeah. But they have no bearing, like they can't prevent anything from happening, or like,
I mean, to my knowledge, not unilaterally. As members of the general court, they have a vote.
Yeah. Bill, does that help answer your question? I don't think we can get a definitive.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I was thinking of, I've had some previous conversations with James Arena DeRosa, not on this subject, so I can contact him and kind of get his take on, what his position is, and if we do happen to vote this down, if he can defend us. I just don't want to lose our grants and money, but I understand everybody else's concerns about, the property, having potential eminent domain or, taken upon of us. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. Thanks for listening to me.
I love that idea. I think everybody on this call email Senator Spilka and Representative Rita DeRosa And if you feel like you're in an affected community, ask them to pass a moratorium. It states the state cannot perform an eminent domain action or force MBTA communities zones to construct anything. Email them right now. That'd be awesome.
It's a very valid point. Emailing your and contacting your representative about your will does cause action. So I encourage that as well. So as I was saying, I think we need to put together like what we're going to do here. So my opinion is I kind of agree with some of the comments, some of the people made about the land with Carbonis and the residences next to Carbonis. I don't love the proposals with those parcels of land. So that kind of rules out two proposals. The only proposal that remains is an expanded downtown and Indian Brook. And I actually, this is why I asked John, I think, this question leading into this meeting. I like the idea of the non-expanded downtown, so a smaller version of downtown, Walcott Valley and the Preserve. That would be my preference of parcels that have been discussed and debated. But I'll open up to the board. So I guess my thinking is we would do it might require us doing this at our next meeting to vote if people agree, but that would be my preference. But I'm open to anybody on the board having any comments, and we can go from there. Go ahead, Matthew.
So what was your proposal? Sorry, it's the 3 condominiums in downtown?
No. It's Walcott Valley, which is the condo association near downtown, the smaller version of the downtown district, and the Preserve.
Preserves. Have we run those numbers? Like what
we've run the numbers like as individual parcels as part of the other 3 plans, but we haven't run them as a total as a singular plan. So we've got the numbers, I think, add up, and they can add up.
So the one thing I would say is one of the things that came up at town meetings, people wanted, quote, another option was what was one of the comments. I think it's worth highlighting at annual town meeting that only one of these was necessarily validated by the state, and I do worry that some people might have concern or make a decision based on what we've already had approved. So I think it's worth providing that context as well. And so I think the idea of having 2 options is something we should consider.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to second that too. I think having, a few options that people can, potentially choose between a town meeting would be beneficial to getting us in compliance.
Through the chair.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, so is there any opportunity to, probably not, but I'm just going to throw it out there, to do yet another plan? And one of the things I heard, and I appreciated the gentleman, I don't remember his name, that was on maybe it was Ted that did that was on the zoning committee, that there was a lot of, sorry, I apologize. So they're doing rezoning some of the commercial land, like over on South Street, would potentially cause traffic issues or would potentially impact the tax base. So, so we're kind of weighing one potential against the potential of the current residents of Hopkinton, like those at the Preserve or those at the other condo things. So it's kind of like, do we think the potential of the commercial real estate is more important than the potential downside for the current residents? And I'm just Is this kind of I don't know whether we could even go back and do anything like that. I know it's probably
So I don't know. I don't think we have time, but so the concern with, so I think there's some confusion. The zoning advisory committee was generally concerned with the traffic situation of Golden Pond. So that's right on West Main Street.
That traffic is a concern for the commercial.
So I think the concern with South Street was twofold. Is you'd be like if a commercial property was built into residences, it'd basically be reducing the potential for industry at that location, and it would and if that happened, it would add school-age children, which would add in potentially to people's property tax bills, and it would also eliminate the possibility of commercial tax revenue from those properties. The traffic on South Street, I don't know if that was a concern. Ted, do you have anything?
Sure, through the chair. The primary concern about South Street was it would be very appealing to developers. It might not be a very difficult purchase for developers. And yes, then it would very quickly lead to more pressure on the schools, and loss of potential commercial tax base. There was talk about traffic on South Street, but it was a tertiary, or whatever the word is, for fourth or fifth concern down the road. The primary concern was it would be very appealing to developers of condos or apartments, and that would put a lot of pressure on the town. We also heard very loudly and clearly from the Chamber of Commerce how much they were not in favor of switching anything on South Street over to something that could be developed for residential.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks, Rob. I definitely recognize and hear a lot of stress from a lot of people that are in these areas that were notified that their areas are being considered that are definitely citizens of Hopkinton, that we want to minimize stress and effect that extending the options they have for zoning would be. But any decision we make will have an impact on the citizens of Hopkinton, regardless of where it is, right? We're defining the zoning for the entire town, and in the future, potentially impacting, and possibly the near future, depending on if we pick undeveloped land, impacting tax base, construction, traffic, et cetera. So any choice we make will impact the citizens of Hopkinton, and our job is to figure out which of those will have the least detriment or the most positive effect. We can't avoid having an impact, though.
Yeah, I totally agree, Matthew. I go back to what I said at the beginning is I don't think anyone on this board or anybody in Hopkinton was looking to find a way to increase zoning to this extent for housing. And this MBTA communities bylaw has been forced upon us at the state level. So we're trying to do our best, but nobody here was saying before that, hey, let's go try to do this. That's not true. So we're just trying to do the best we can with what we've been given. But yeah, there's no, in my opinion, there's no plan that if it got approved or not approved would not impact the town in one way or another. Whether it's a plan is approved or a plan is not approved, I see it impacting the town, and it's up to people at town meeting to decide how they want to vote. Vic, go ahead.
Yep. I just want to add that, from a tax point of view, whether it's commercial or residential, it's the same. There's not much of a difference. So most of our assessment as part of zoning board, we've taken consideration into the traffic, and as the others were, Matthew and Rob, but you already touched out, that it should always have positive impact if something happens, not that to enforce or take selectively or a planned thing that only these residents has to be captured or something like that. So it's just more of a calculated, well discussed, well debated opportunities what we brought it upfront. However, I think there's one point which called out with one of our participants out here saying that did we check any individual single family homes when we started debating it across? Yes, we did look at it, a couple of single family homes and the impact of it. But that was also taken consideration. That's all I just want to call it out.
So just to be kind of transparent, I don't love the idea of putting together multiple proposals for town meeting. I think on the town meeting floor, any resident can make a motion to amend the article, and then that amendment can be voted on, and then the amendment can be voted on, and it can get quite complex. Multiple options put forward make that process even more complex. But obviously we're a board, so I will do what the board wants to do. Any other comments?
Through the chair.
Go ahead, John.
Dale's iPad's hand is raised again. I've lowered it a couple times and it's just been raised again. I don't know if Dale is trying to make a comment. Do you want me to allow them to talk?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see.
Nope. I'm trying to keep it lowered and it just keeps going up and down, up and down. I am so sorry. Me and technology are pretty horrible.
All right. What does the member of the board? What does the members of the board think of my my proposal? Jane, go ahead.
In the beginning of this conversation many months ago, I thought it might be a good idea to put two proposals together. And I think because there wasn't a really clear answer, but hearing your most recent proposal, Rob, I think that seems to me the most probable right now, because it would, I think those units, making them smaller, including the new potential growth that's going to go in downtown, those three things would probably make it less attractive for a developer to come in and be able to buy up all those properties, or even some of them. So I would be in favor right now with going with your newest proposal, which would be the number 4, I guess.
All right, thanks, Jane. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure we have, options so we can, get something approved and get us in compliance. But based on everything, oh, sorry, I was just going to say one more thing, Rob, then you can go. Based on everything we, talked about with Carbonis, I would say we should take that out of all the options, or the single option that we put forward. So.
Yeah, thanks. I think any land areas that we know that we've done our homework on, we would know, like, of all this parcels on these maps, we've done kind of our homework to know, like, how many units could be built at the land areas. So, like, if somebody proposes, I don't know, some land that's not like I said, if somebody tries to make an amendment at town meeting to include, I don't know, any land area, like Hopkinen Country Club, like anything, like we can't prepare for every parcel and every combination of parcels to know how that would impact any maps. So I don't really know what to do in that case, but that is completely possible. Go ahead, Lucia.
In terms of Carbonis, I'm wondering why it was included in the original proposal, if it's the case that it's, easily developable. And I was wondering if Ted or Vic, since he's on Zach, could speak to that.
Ted, do you want to give it a shot?
Sure. That was a long, long time ago. But here's what I think is true. It is quite possible, maybe probable, that Mr. Weissmantel raises some good points. So I will concede those points. What we know is Carbonis has a significant amount of wetlands around it. It does not have access to sewer. It does not have access to water. And those seem to us to be pretty significant hurdles. When it comes to whether it did get developed, we liked its proximity to the Southborough train station, that we could have residents walk to the train station, encouraging people without cars, and that if there was traffic that was created, it was most likely going to lead northward toward Route 9, not into our downtown area. So we really liked what, if it were developed, and we didn't think it would likely be developed anytime soon, we liked what it might do to pedestrian, public transit, and car traffic. That's my memory of our discussions.
Thanks, Ted. Elise, go ahead.
If I could just add on to that, I was on Zach when this first came to us. Oh, sorry. And I believe it was I believe the requirements for Hopkinton were a little bit different when we were first presented with MBTA, because they wanted more property to be closer to this train station. And then they came back saying that we were an adjacent community, and that was later. They said we were an adjacent community and that the land could be, in different areas. But I think at first, when we were first presented with this, we were trying to pick parcels of land close to the train station. That's part of why Carboni's was one of the first proposed places too.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. There was, when the bylaw or first came about, there was vagueness on the requirements. And it was unclear when this first came to Hopkinton, to the Zoning Advisory Committee, if it was going to be required to be within a certain distance of the train station or not. But obviously over time, they solidified their requirements and said for an adjacent community, it didn't have to be within a certain radius, a certain distance of the train station. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, so by the time it got to the planning board last year, though, I think we had got that clarification, even though that's probably one of the reasons we were originally looking at it. From memory, I think some of the reasons we ended up picking it was it made sense with the spirit for the reasons that Ted just mentioned, if it were to be developed, and it also kept the parcels close together and smaller, and it was just made more sense for where it was in the town compared to where else we were looking at the time.
Thanks, Matthew.
Reasons and transit.
Anyone else have any comments? So, John, I'm at the point where I don't know what I can do in this meeting. Like, I want to move. I want to entertain a motion to consider my proposal, but I don't know if we need to notify abutters or for our next meeting.
So you only need to make a motion to close a public hearing or make a recommendation at town meeting. You don't need to make a motion to consider a new proposal.
What was the last part?
To make a recommendation at town meeting.
But we need to state what the recommendation is, right?
Right. So you don't, if you want to evaluate your proposal at the next hearing, you don't need a motion for that. You would just continue the hearing to the next meeting. But if you're looking to recommend the proposal that you are proposing, then you would take a motion to recommend that proposal to town meeting for either adoption or defeat. Or you can make a motion for two proposals and the recommendation of the planning board to pass one and not the other.
All right. So after I say this, we can have discussion. But I'd like to entertain a motion that the planning board recommend to preserve Walcott Valley and the smaller downtown district as the MBTA community districts at our special town meeting.
So through the chair, does that motion mean that the planning board would recommend town meeting adopt that proposal as the zoning?
Yes, that's my intent. Is there any discussion before we get somebody move the motion or second?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have, like, I think we should see the numbers and run a model with that before we decide to propose it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we just want to make sure it conforms, I think, right? We don't want to try to move something that's like slightly short or.
Can we get those numbers before our next meeting, John?
You can get.
Yeah,
you can get them for next meeting. Next meeting is next Monday.
No. Okay.
So I think that's what I'd like to do. I'd like before we adjourn for tonight, is there any other? What's the kind of, if we take a straw poll, what are people's sentiment on having two proposals? I've voiced my kind of concerns, but why don't I just go around and we'll take a straw poll of your sentiment. Elise, what do you think? Should we have a second? Should we just go with a singular proposal that could be amended, or should we try to put forward two proposals?
I'm sort of on the fence here because, like you mentioned earlier, I feel like anything at town meeting can go any direction. But that being said, we've heard a lot of residents who are in the areas who are very unhappy. And I think to be more fair to people, we should give them a choice or an option instead of just telling them one thing.
I kind of look at it as pitting neighbors against neighbors, where some people live in one or live in or near one parcel of land versus the other, which I don't love either.
Yeah, I get it.
Parker, what do you think?
I thought you were going to go in the order of voting.
I was, but then you were just next to Elise on my screen.
I mean, listen, my trade is sales, and I put forward two options, sometimes three. I would call it good, better, best. You know, I think the risk is that people get confused. And, you know, on the floor, people are asking, are we talking about Plan 1 modification of Section 2? It's just going to be a nightmare. And people are going to say, is it the second property on Plan 2 or the third property? It's going to be all over the place. And I think looking around a corner, I think we make a decision, and based on it, the logic associated with the decision, and the decision, as was alluded to earlier, was we were trying to go with something that was going to be in the spirit of the law, which if there was going to be construction with Carbones in the future, then it would be by property. I think we've since come to a conclusion. I think the consensus is paper compliance. And if that is the consensus of the board, then paper compliance and mitigating any construction, but staying in compliance with the law is the Benson proposal of today. We stand firm with that. Otherwise, I think we open up confusion, and that's my thought.
All right, thanks, Parker. Vic, what do you think?
I would like to go with one proposal. The only reason, as Parker and the team identified, that might create confusion. The idea behind when it came to the zoning board was that zoning board gives 3 options to planning board, and planning board would select one. But if we are taking 3 multiple options, Rob, you rightly put, it's pitting one each other neighbors, and that's not what we are here. As in a good spirit, we want to give the best for the town. So my vote is to go with one proposal.
Lucia, what do you think?
I think if we were to move forward with 2 proposals, they would have to be 2 very different proposals. So it would have to be one proposal is addressing these concerns. This proposal is addressing these concerns, or this proposal is the best because of these reasons, and this proposal is the best because of these reasons. So if we can do that, I feel like that is something that special town meeting can decide. That's my feeling.
All right, thank you. Karen.
Yeah, I think Lucia pretty much took the words out of my mouth. They would have to, if we did 2, they would have to be completely different, because I do agree with what you were saying, Rob. It can't be pitting neighbor and against neighbor, you know, one group against another, depending on who's voting. But I really liked Lucia's opinion of if they were completely different, and we could clearly state, you know, what concerns each one was addressing, and leave it up to the town to decide. If we don't have time or the ability to create, well, say we go with yours for one, Rob, and then if we don't have time to create a second one that's radically different, then I would say let's keep it simple and just go with one and give it to the town and see what happens.
Thanks, Karen. Jane, do you have anything? You kind of said one proposal, but do you have anything else to add?
I think at this point it might be very difficult to come up with something very different, and because all the others, basically they all, you know, the other option would probably be back to including Carbonis, which would add the risk of, you know, development and bringing in more school children. I think we need to keep in mind I think the priority for a lot of us was paper compliance by not including the option of not offer to an opportunity to develop something new like Carbonis. Although at the time that was a very good option, very appealing at the time, but I think Ken Weismantel added a great deal to tonight's discussion, and thank you, Ted, for reminding us of all of the research that's gone into it so far in all of our discussions over the last couple of years. If somehow we can explain that and demonstrate that to folks at town meeting, either through charts or, you know, kind of explaining it through paper form, so people can have something as a backup when they're voting on these things. And it is difficult because we're seeing, you know, dissension among neighborhoods, and that's the very last thing any of us ever wanted, besides offering an opportunity to develop and risking more school kids in our systems. I don't know what another option would look like, to tell you the truth at this point. We've kind of hashed over everything.
Thanks, Jane.
It's worth a chance.
Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, the 2 things that come to mind are that a lot of people at town meeting probably haven't been following around with all the options, and listening to people go to town meeting and say, like, we want options, providing them 2 different options might help address a little of that, and at least make it clear that, you know, we've thought of different things. I'm curious what people think would be radically different, since we have the downtown in all of our solutions, and all of our options. I don't think we want to get rid of that. The other thought escapes me now.
All right.
That's all for now.
All right, John, I see Igor R. on our attendees raised his hand.
Thank you. Igor Rumisin again, 49 Forest Lane. Just a bit of kind of reminder of history here. Last time Preserve Community was up on the ballot, it went up in arms effectively. They invoked whoever they could invoke, and they have defeated the proposal. I know that because I was a part of the process. If it is up on the ballot again, then the same thing would repeat again. So whichever option you folks choose, just like bear in mind that this time around, they will also have the additional argument that this is the proposal that was already defeated, so why are we looking at this again?
I think anyone at that attends town meeting should vote. And I think everyone in town that is able to come to town meeting should come to town meeting. I don't have anything else to add to that. So what I'd like to do is, as I think several people recommended, consider the numbers and the calculations of those 3 parcels for our next meeting. The only question is, do we have anything else about the other ones on our agenda that we notice people in the other areas? And if we did want to consider more than one option, we should notice people as best, like according to our rules.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, John.
It is too late to notify any people, any new abutters before time.
All right. So, okay. So, but we can run the numbers and we can vote on the proposal. We should be able to vote on the proposal I put forth because all those people have been notified. So I think
I've sent town council an email to confirm that.
All right, perfect. So I think that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to continue this to the next meeting, get the calculations for those 3 parcels, and then we'll have our vote next week.
I think Ted's hand is
Ted,
raised.
go ahead.
Rob, I don't know. I don't know if I need to say my name again. Ted Barker, Hook 75 Grove Street. I don't know if it's my place to speak up. I am not on the planning board. But here's what I think I heard tonight, just to throw it out there. We looked at 3 different proposals, 2 of which included Carbones, and my sense of the will of the planning board is that we'd like to remove Carbones. So, okay. One of the proposals included keeping the preserve, and we heard a lot of concern, frustration from the people in the preserve. Another proposal included Walcott Valley, and we heard a lot of question and concern from people in Walcott Valley. The Benson proposal, as I understand it, is a proposal that includes both the preserve and Walcott Valley, where we heard a great deal of concern. We also had a proposal that had the Indian Brook apartments, where we heard, if I remember correctly, questions for clarification, but not a tremendous amount of concern from Indian Brook residents. And yet that is not a proposal that's being considered right now. And I know you're not voting on a proposal or proposals tonight, but I wanted to speak up just to question the wisdom of putting in one proposal the 2 properties that generated the most concern and saying this is our proposal. That's all I wanted to throw out. And again, maybe I'm speaking out of place as not a member of the planning board, but given the work that Zach did, I thought it might be worth throwing that out there for you guys to consider.
Thanks, Ted. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say, I was kind of thinking, I understand the thought behind it, but that proposal would be defeated. It's got no chance of passing. So, the thought behind doing multiple ones was, to give us at least a chance to be compliant. So, that was kind of the reason behind that. I get the confusion. Parker made a good point. There'd be a lot of confusion, having multiple proposals and showing multiple parcels up on a map at town meeting. But I still think we kind of have to keep the ability alive to be compliant with this law from the state.
So I don't necessarily agree with that, but go ahead, Parker.
I didn't think you would. I don't know, man. I think at this point, it's maybe it is two proposals. I'm willing to admit I'm wrong, and maybe Lucia's right. We do in Brook, Carbones downtown, or Preserve, Walcott, downtown. And the two factors are, here's the growth plan, which, hey, do you want your property taxes to go up in 10 years because there's going to be a lot of growth and we have to maybe build more schools? That's one option. And the other side is the paper compliance. And we'll let people choose.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Ted.
Maybe I remember wrong. Indian Brook did not require Carbones. It was Indian Brook and downtown was one option.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, you're right. Option 2. Thank you.
Yep.
Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at completely different, like the options 1 and 2 seem like candidates. And basically we're giving people the option of something that's been approved by the state and is highly likely to pass and fits the spirit as we interpret it of the zoning guidelines, or something different.
Thanks, Matthew. All right, we've been discussing this for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm going to take these next two hands raised, and we're gonna move to the next meeting. Kathy, go ahead. Kathy, you're muted.
Hi.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, this is Kathy from 20 Turnbridge Lane, Indian Brook. And there is a lot of concern.
Chair. Sorry, we just need a last name too.
Pardon? Oh, Kathy Lally. And there is a lot of concern within the community. I don't know why there weren't more questions, but we do have a lot of questions. You did answer a lot of them. The concern is too, again, where do we go? We're on the lower real estate value in the town. All around every surrounding town, everywhere, there's no place to go. So we're building units for people, for places to live, but we're putting other people out. And there's nothing in place to help us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Ken Wisemantle, go ahead.
One of the things you might want to research in the next week is whether an amendment at town meeting with a different map would be considered by the moderator as within the four corners of the article. You may not be able to amend the map because you would not be warning the people, which is what the warrant does, of what is going to be discussed at town meeting. So you may be very limited as to where you can maybe make some minor wording changes, but swapping out one condo from another at town meeting, I think would be not within the four corners, but then again, it's up to the town moderator to make that decision. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I agree with Ted Barker-Hook's concerns on his political judgment on that. He is probably right.
Thanks, Ken. Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, Ken raises a good point that we've discussed before, is that we just can't, as John's answered this in the past, as I recall, we just can't run the models in real time. So I think if we're going to give people options, we need to have those options prepared and come with them, and not expect amendments to be made beyond a minimal scope on the town floor for this to be meaningful.
I think Ken's question is valid. So I guess so I'm not town moderator, but my assumption was that any parcel within Hopkins would be within the four corners of the article. But I do think it's worth checking with the town moderator ahead of time and getting their interpretation, because that's their job. They are the moderator. Let's go to Ellen.
Through the chair, just to address that point.
Yep.
So it's my understanding that you can't just pick a parcel at town meeting and add it, because that owner has not been properly notified that their parcel would be included in an action at town meeting. So the question is, these parcels that have already been notified but are a part of a different proposal, can they be recombined to a new proposal? But I can tell you pretty certainly that if somebody were to go up to the floor at town meeting and recommend including a parcel that hadn't even been considered in the first place, that would be outside of open meeting law because the owner would not have been notified that town meeting would be considering their parcel for a zoning change.
Thanks, John. Ellen, your hand is raised.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to express that Indian Brook is here. We maybe haven't spoken up because all of the things that we wanted to say have been expressed by others. We are concerned. I think that, any of these options do pit neighbor against neighbor, and that's a bit unfair. It also should, the unlikely event of developers coming in to look at any of these parcels, we are governed by volunteer boards who, while there are some guardrails on how many units would need to be sold and how many could be sold to an individual, we are ill prepared to police that. And we would be disproportionately affected should developers come in and want to, and whether it happens 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, this really disproportionately affects the owners who would be out of our homes compared to spreading ill effect of more housing across all of the town. So I just wanted to say Indian Brook is here, and I hope that my neighbors will show up at town meeting to vote as well. It's not just the Preserve and Walcott who don't like being targeted for acquisition.
Thanks, Ellen. Vijaya, go ahead.
I think Vijaya, you're on mute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, this is Mrs. Sundar. I'm from Lehman Lane, Indian Brooks. So Indian Brooks is here. While we respect the spirit of, welcoming whatever the state is requesting us and being compliant to it, but I think it's really not in the spirit of displacing almost 100 homes and trying to build something and welcome, additional families in the neighborhood. To the, board, my request would be identify something which is vacant, which can be, compliant in order to include in the proposal.
Thanks, Vijaya. So for tonight, we're gonna end here at 9:30, 3 minutes. So what I'd like to do is add the proposal as a fourth option for our next meeting. Our next meeting, we're going to vote on including 1, 2, 3, or 4 options, and that's what we're going to go forward with at town meeting. We can't, as John said, we don't have enough time to notice abutters or landowners of any new land for potential proposal. And so that's what I think our plan should be. Unless there's any other comments, I'd like to, I'm ready to adjourn for this evening, unless anyone has any last comments. So Matthew, go ahead.
Do we need to, this is a public meeting? Do we need to continue?
I don't think, because it's.
Yes, I think public hearing, we need to continue it.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to November 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Let me get my sheet. Elise Mayalowski, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Happ,
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes. And at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Parker. Thanks, Vic. Elise Mayalowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Happ,
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks for the conversation. And I'll see everybody in a week from tonight.